out. I'm hoping time and location haven't confused people, but welcome to those of you who have come. I think most people now are really not too sure, but most people are aware of North Vancouver Forum and what we're all about. I mean, we've had a little bit of a chat. So we've been focused on the development of Lot 5 and on building a kind of a community conversation about the development of the waterfront, but also the development of North Vancouver. So the idea for this event was to, I mean, at the root of everything we've been doing is kind of asking the question, how do we build community? And how do we get people involved in the decision-making process and involved in the dialogue? And what are some of the different ways of doing that? We have been focused on Lot 5 because of its potential and its history, and it has kind of like a blank slate at the heart of the city. And there's been this conversation that's been happening backwards and forwards. The volleyball courts were slated to go down there, and then the city couldn't decide on that, and so it's now up in the air again for a temporary use for the site. And so we kind of wanted to have a panel discussion with some different points of view and different perspectives to help kind of drive that conversation and give a different aspect to what makes community, what public space means. One of the big elements of the city's plan and the original stakeholders workshop was to make sure that site in Lot 5 and all of the central waterfront includes public art and sort of has features that are going to bring people in. And so we asked Tyler to come out and participate because of his experience with art and building community gathering spaces. So just to quickly introduce our panelists, Emily, I misspelled your name on the poster, so I apologize. But then I noticed that the city also misspelled your name on the agenda.
The hazard of having.
Yeah. Emily is working to build community and grow healthy fresh vegetables and a thriving local food system through her work as community coordinator with the Edible Garden Project. You may have noticed at City Council on Monday night, Lutet Farm won the Sustainable City Award, 2012 Sustainable City Award. Kudos for that. The Edible Garden Project, and we'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves a little bit as well, but I'll give a bit of bio. So the Edible Garden Project is developing and strengthening a local network of people, growing and sharing food, building skills, and increasing access to growing space for marginalized urban communities on the North Shore. She enjoys working collaboratively to bring fresh ideas to the table, innovative ways to engage with people, and hope to communities. So that's exactly the kind of the conversation that we're trying to drive around Lot 5 and the Central Waterfront. Is that question: how do you build community? Some of I guess we had our first event was with Matt Hearn, who came out gave a speech about public space and the future of cities, and he does a lot of community work over in East Vancouver. And one of the things that he said is he works in his garden. He works building community green spaces, and that's the place where everybody comes out and gathers and engages with him in conversation. And he made the comment that he's a bald guy with tattoos and often is intimidating to people, and yet when he's out the front gardening, it doesn't matter who it is that's coming by, they sort of get involved in the conversation. Tyler, you may know from Cafe Contemporary Art. I wanted to touch on his bio a little bit, just because people who know him well don't often know the sort of depth of his background, but he speaks several languages, holds a BA in International Development Studies from Dalhousie, an MA in New Intermediate Art from the Tokyo National University of Fine Art and Music, worked with local peace groups in the former Yugoslavia, did an internship at the Lester B. Pearson Canadian International Peacekeeping Training Center, worked for 2 years as a coordinator for the international relations of the municipality of Nakatsue in Japan. As a curator, he's organized exhibitions in Korea, Japan, Canada, and has worked on the curatorial teams of major international exhibitions. So again, when we're talking about how to build community, how to build gathering spaces, public art and the role that art plays in those sorts of conversations, we thought it'd be valuable to include Tyler in the conversation. And for yet another sort of different perspective, Alexandre Hebert is a professional engineer and currently is the Energy and Sustainability Manager at BCIT, exploring how sustainability can yield additional energy savings, how to integrate sustainable energy concepts into the curriculum. So again, talking about Lot 5 and the central waterfront, what are some of the energy considerations that we can be giving? And we'll ask Alexandre to sort of give a bit of his take on what Lot 5 looks like and what the future could look like for North Vancouver. So I'm going to hand it over to Amanda to ask a few questions, and we can make this fairly casual because there's not too many of us, but if anyone has questions or wants to jump in with their own questions or ask, sort of to get some background, feel free to just jump in.
Okay, so let me know if you have any questions, and we can always work them in. The first 3 questions I have are for each of our panelists. So we'll go through each question and give you each an opportunity to answer. So first of all, we'll start with Tyler. Can you tell us about yourself, your organization, if that's applicable, and about some of the ways that what you do affects or could affect our community?
Okay. Our community.
Or a community.
Okay, a community. Yeah, I wrote the answers before.
Prepared.
This is kind of embarrassing, but I did it, and I may as well go about reading them because they were my first instinct, and now it would be a second instinct. But I guess I've been categorized and recognized as an artist, a curator, an entrepreneur, a bureaucrat, a coordinator, an administrator, an art fag, a barista, a mediocre relief taco cook, a rabble-rouser, an activist, a translator, a polyglot, a peace builder, a son, a father, a brother, a student, a teacher, a facilitator, and so on. My core interests are in not touching my keypad. My core interests are in post-conflict reconciliation, preventative diplomacy, peace building, and the establishment of mechanisms and infrastructures for peace, co-prosperity, and enjoyment of life. And I believe art.
We need that with the city.
Huh?
We need that with the city of Vancouver.
Yeah, and I believe art, and more to the point, contemporary cultural productivity, whether caretaking for the past or producing the new, is essential. And that without community participation, engagement, and interaction, art and the sort of cultural productivity that I like to think about are lost, and the cornerstone of peace infrastructure is missing. So, and that being said. That cornerstone being the capacity or means of struggling honestly with the task of self-examination, inquiry into how we see ourselves and how we observe or see ourselves in relation to others, the world around us, the cosmos, abstract ideals, and so on. The Cafe for Contemporary Art is finally a self-financing neighborhood-based space for cultural production and exchange that, as most of you know, is located just over there on Esplanade. And it's I like to think about it, or I intend it, as a platform for producing new understandings. And it's a starting point of a long journey, and that I'm interested in producing contributing to peace-interested cultural infrastructure in the Pacific Rim. To give context, my master's thesis was entitled "Dancing at the End of Pax Americana: Contemporary Art and International Relations in Northeast Asia," and so that's where I'm coming from. It's kind of big, but and there's impacts that you create an infrastructure for examining, sort of looking at ourselves and reflecting on where we exist without having to necessarily depend on the state, and that's for all kinds of reasons. And so anyway, that's That's me. Sorry, it was like silly. Why should you print this stuff?
Do you have anything to add about what you do and how ways of affecting our community?
Think local. Sorry.
Yeah, think local rather than big and.
Well, local comes up in all the other questions, but the.
Fair enough. No, that's a good answer.
But you know how it affects community locally is that you know it's amazing. You have 2 days between exhibitions or 3 days between exhibitions at the cafe, and we have like a couple hundred people coming through there each day, and with just a moment of that space being open, people are like, "Oh, we could. Oh, but if we have." We're booked until 2014. I greatly apologize, but that kind of it contributes to that kind of sense that there's this possibility for making something happen. And at the scale of like a little cube inside a cafe with a seemingly really easygoing guy who runs it,
Seemingly.
that then there's this kind of like opening of possibility, and seeing how people engage with that, I think is really interesting. And you know, Lot 5 does the same for the more ambitious. You know, they're like, oh, hey, we can do something with that publicly owned hunk of land, but it's not. You get daunted by these like big mechanisms of bureaucracy and backroom deals and big developers and all that kind of stuff. But when you have a small space, like a playground, a sandbox, you know, and this is like a sandbox for adults. This is sort of what we're providing, and things, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to Alex. So Alex, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself or your organization, if that's applicable, and about some of the ways that what you do affects or could affect the community?
Yes, I can. So I'm the energy manager at BCIT, and so I'm a BCIT employee, but I get paid. Half of my salary comes from BCIT, and BCIT pays me to find ways to use less of what they sell. And that's how I always describe my job, which is a bit weird, right? You go to IKEA and you're thinking about buying 2 couches and maybe 2 beds and a bed. People say, are you sure you need 2? Maybe 1 is enough. And you'll never see that anywhere, right? The more you buy, the better it is, except that in BC, most people who were born here don't realize it from my experience, but there's not enough electricity for everyone. And depending on how you account for it, there's barely enough if it's a good year for rainfall, and there's not enough on a bad year. But the demand will grow by another 50% in the next 20 years, because population in BC will grow by about 35% in the next 20 years. And so BCIO doesn't know what to do with this, knowing that all the rivers have been dammed already except one site that could still be dammed. And so they have limited solutions right now in the short term, in the next 20 years, to create new electricity. So they're thinking, well, instead of creating new electricity, we'll try to get people to use less and make them less wasteful and more efficient. So I spend 5 days a week. I've been doing it for 4 years, trying to get BCIT to use less electricity. And so it's a bit less concrete. I'm a big fan of art, and I think public art is something that should be everywhere. My stuff is behind the wall. It's a bit boring. I get really excited, so you'll have to stop me when you heard enough about it. But I think any community that wants to be sustainable and lively needs to think about these issues, because everything we do uses energy. Everything, like iPad, the lights, the heating, the cool neons, and everything.
Sustainable is a word we've heard a lot of in the last 2 years. So yeah, that's important. Emily, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your organization, and about some of the ways that what you do affects or could affect?
Sure. I will start a little bit further back than I thought I was going to. So I grew up on East 2nd Street, just by St. George's, or St. Patrick's, sorry, a little bit further east. And my world as a child really consisted of, I wasn't allowed to go past the western yellow speed bump or the eastern green garbage can. That was like my world. And I didn't interact much with the community beyond what existed in that alley and the other kids whose backyard